Now, on Philadelphia's #1 college radio station, WHIP, Rational Radio.
What's going on, everybody? You are listening to Rational Radio here on WHIP Radio, Philly's #1 college radio station. It is Wednesday, and that means you are listening to the Beyond the Lede segment here in the Rational Radio time slot. And today, lots to talk about from this week's edition of the Temple News. To start it off right now, we are joined by Joe Brandt, who is here to talk about the Board of Trustees meeting that happened on Monday, where they voted to approve funding for the Temple Stadium, a meeting that drew lots of protests outside. And the Board of Trustees ultimately decided that they were going to go ahead with it. Not one trustee abstained or voted against the proposal to start the process of looking into an on-campus stadium. So we are going to dive into that further here. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for having me.
So talk a little bit about, first, just what it was like being in there, because certainly I was following it on Twitter, and it seemed wild from what I was reading.
Yeah, it's I covered the board sort of sporadically over the past year, and a lot my freshman year, and it's probably the most packed meeting I've ever seen. Definitely more like mainstream media than I'd ever seen. Tensions were understandably high, but from what I understand, they let a few people in from the protest that was going on outside just to sort of funnel them into the public comment portion so they could voice their concerns.
And so were those people, when they got up there to ask their questions, because we were talking about this earlier with the first meeting with Ryan Rinaldi and President Theobald and Pat Kraft, were they yelling at the Board of Trustees?
No, I think I wasn't at the meeting last week, but I had heard about how it wasn't too constructive.
Yeah.
There was a lot of yelling from what I understand, but this was more measured, I think. There was some yelling. I know a man said, "We can't fight you, but we just want to make sure that you're doing this the right way," or something to that effect. And then someone piped up, "We can fight this." But for the most part, I think it was measured. O'Connor, the chairman, he would ask people to come up. They would say their piece, and then the next person would come up. But I think they did have an issue. They had 10 people spoke. It was probably an hour almost of public comment, and there were still more people who had stuff to say that they just moved on.
Wow. All right, so now that we kind of have the emotional aspect in place, talk a little bit about kind of the nuts and bolts of the meeting, kind of what happened.
Sure. So basically, from what we were told, they're approving $1 million for basically a study into what the impact of the stadium would be. They want to sort of meet with some architects. They'll decide on an architect within the next month, and then that architect from there can give them some tips on what the designs could be like. They definitely said they want the stadium to be built more into the ground. And then they also sort of set a hard cap on how much money, the budget for the stadium. So probably $130 million, they said. And they want $50 million of that to come from fundraising.
Okay. And then where do we know where the other portion would come from?
They said that it's the money that would otherwise go to the link.
Okay.
And they were pretty adamant about it not being tuition. And they, like I said, $50 million in fundraising. And then I talked with President Theobald after the meeting, and he said they have about $12 million signed over.
Okay.
And then 15, like he said, in the pipeline.
So that $12 million, if it's not used for the stadium, does it go away?
It's from what I understand, it's donor commitments who want to see a stadium.
Kind of like a use it or lose it type deal.
It's donors who want to see a stadium.
Okay. Because I'm just thinking, does this vote commit them to building the stadium? Can they still back out of it?
Yeah, I think it's not 100% it's definitely, this vote I think brings them a lot closer toward building that, and that's sort of how it's been framed. But there's still, they said that community conversation will happen after the sort of design and environmental impact portion. So they said they'd have the architect within 30 days. So maybe within the next month or two, we'll see some more meetings about getting this off the ground.
And, you know, I don't know if they revealed this yesterday, but from what I've seen, it doesn't look like anybody is actually going to be displaced out of their home. It doesn't. From what I've seen, now correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, they said they sent out their release last night, and I'm not sure if they actually bothered to bring it up in the meeting, but no, it's not being built on. They're not acquiring new land to build it. They've already pledged that the Amos Recreation Center, which I know is a big part of the protest, that the Amos Recreation Center would go away. They had even had a poster drawn by kids who they spend their time at the rec center. Like, don't bully us, Temple. Don't demolish the rec center. But Temple has said the rec center is not going away. So,
okay. Well, I mean, that's good that they can keep that there, because I know, looking for some sort of bridge between us and the community. Did you happen to talk to any people from the community yesterday?
Well, I had seen them during the public comment, but yeah, EJ, who we wrote the article together yesterday in the heat of the moment. He talked with a man named Tyrone Reed. Okay. He's featured in there's a documentary called We All Live Here. It's sort of about the community relations between Temple and the community. Tyrone Reed is pretty heavily featured in that, and he even brought up the documentary. And he said something to the effect of, well, it's in the article. He says something about he doesn't want to have to fight for his community. He just feels a little slighted, I guess is the right word. And then there are a few other people from the community who spoke at the meeting, and one of them, she actually has taken the trash out of our office before, and I thought that was interesting. She got up in her janitorial uniform, and she spoke about how the stadium would affect her, because she lives on Norris Street, like between Broad and 15th.
That's Guadalupe Portillo?
That's okay. Yep, Guadalupe, yeah.
Interesting, because what I want to know is, we talked about the first meeting with Jillian, and she indicated that really there wasn't much room for compromise. Like the people who live in the community really just don't want to see it happen at all, and I'm wondering if you got that same sense yesterday, that like, is there something Temple can do to kind of say, hey, we'll do this, and like in exchange for you letting us build the stadium?
Yeah, I think there definitely some of the message was we don't want a stadium at all, but there are a few more nuanced views that I think are in the article. There's the man named John Bowie, who basically wasn't really asking for them to not build the stadium so much as asking for them to do it in a way that sort of includes the community. And I mean, this isn't uncommon. This is messages like these come out when temples built other big buildings. When Morgan Hall was built, people from North Philly, they went to Darrell Clark, and Darrell Clark said, okay, Morgan Hall can be built, but you have to hire people from North Philly to staff the building. And that's sort of that's some compromise was made.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good compromise. I mean, if these people otherwise have, I'm sure, other maybe lower paying jobs or no job, that a job in Morgan Hall is at least a benefit. Because I mean, from his standpoint, right, he's trying to bring jobs to the area and put these people.
And that's one of the spins they're putting on it. Definitely some new rhetoric yesterday was North Broad Renaissance, that's something that Clark and City Council had talked about for a while. They put the Avenue of the Arts A up on North Broad Street. Avenue North, Pearl Theater was part of that. And now they're saying, we're spending $300 million for Broad Street, even though the library won't quite be on Broad. Yeah. But the stadium and then the other athletic fields at William Penn, they're trying to tout that as sort of revitalizing that. Yeah. And then Chairman O'Connor, he's the chairman of the board, he had said he wants the jobs that would be created by the stadium, he wants them to be filled by community members. So.
Okay. Because also something I saw come out yesterday is that, and this is the first time I'd seen it, that there were plans for like a I don't want to say shopping district, but a retail kind of strip on 15th Street.
Yeah, so they said that would be along Broad and along Montgomery Avenue, probably around that would be the east and south side of the stadium complex, sort of. And Theobald, he compared it to Fenway Park, and then he showed some pictures of what it looks like around Fenway Park. So yeah, you have the edge of the stadium, and then I think there's a Target there. He didn't say anything about what stores could potentially be there because it's still kind of early, but. Yeah, Fenway has a Target. There's a Barnes & Noble Guitar Center even.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a smaller space that we're dealing with here, but it's something that they want to tout. I think definitely nowadays when you build big buildings in cities, you tout mixed use, and that seems to, I don't know, it seems to be a boon, and people seem to go for that.
And what was the community reaction to that? Did they seem opposed to that too, or?
Their reaction didn't really focus on whether there was retail or not. That was just kind of that was a very interesting part of it, and it was we highlighted it because it was sort of a new addition to just a new idea that they had, but no one really responded to that specific part of it. I think
because they were even saying I saw that they wanted to close 15th Street to vehicle traffic.
Yeah, that is something we're hoping to get another interview with the president, in the coming weeks, and that's something that we would want to ask about.
Because I'm just sitting here thinking, I'm like, they're going to close a section of the street, how? I mean, grid system, right? I guess in theory you go up and around, but I mean, it's just maybe it'll work.
Yeah, I think they had said in the meeting last week, the more sort of contentious one, that that would be a pedestrian walkway, and that as the Temple campus has grown, that is something that they've done. Leocaris Walk used to be Park Avenue, Paulette Walk used to be Burke Street, and then the Burke Mall. It's part of the growth of the campus, I guess. You get to close off a street and make it a walkway.
Yeah. And then I also saw in the article that Drew Katz was there. The son of Lou Katz, who passed away.
Right. Yeah.
Earlier this year, and he saying that his father was very much in favor of the stadium. Yeah.
Louis Katz. He used to be the chairman of the athletics committee. Big Temple booster. He was very pro stadium, and I wasn't aware of that. There had been rumors maybe my freshman year that they were thinking about a stadium, but then now it's coming out that he was very, very much in support of a stadium. He really wanted one. So Drew Katz has said time and again to me and EJ now that he wants to continue his father's legacy. But I think he did point out that he saw some need for more of a conversation.
Yeah, and I just think that's it because following this as I have, that's a voice that I'm seeing for the first time in this in that interview. What have you heard anything from Darrell Clark about the stadium in regards to this? Maybe not in regards to this last meeting, but over the past couple weeks.
I think one of our next steps is to try to get in touch with him and see. Temple has said that he supports it.
Really?
Temple has said that, but I'd like to hear from Darrell Clark that he supports it. I think if they tout that it will bring jobs, he couldn't be against it, really, because that would look bad. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, because I'm thinking if he says he's for it, and he comes into the neighborhood and tells everybody hey, I'm for this. Are they still going to be against it, right? Or are they going to now say, oh, now we're going to protest at City Hall, and now we're going to protest his office?
I don't know, yeah.
Because I know Jim Kenney still remains against the stadium plan.
Yeah, he had sort of dialed that back a little bit after sort of day one of I'm against the stadium, and then he dialed it back a little bit, but I think, he's still against it.
At this point, what do we think the timeline would be for this?
Well, they said construction by 2017. So
breaking ground 2017.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it would probably take a while.
That's what I'm thinking, right? Because I'm thinking about the library, right? They started breaking ground on that in the fall, and they're saying it won't be open until 2018. I'm not sure fall or spring 2018. But, I mean, and that's, 3 years almost to build that. And I think it would be interesting if it, I assume it probably takes 2.5 years to build a stadium.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years to build a stadium, which could, 2017 could put us at 2020, coinciding the stadium with that big green space that they're planning on opening.
Yeah, I mean, we hope that we can get a more concrete answer on that in the coming weeks, yeah.
And so, we're calling this Beyond the Lede. What kind of beyond the article did you find interesting or significant that you were covering when you were covering this?
Yeah, like I said, it's definitely the most packed meeting that I've seen of the meetings that I've been to. There was a protest outside. I think the protest for specifically about Dr. Montero, who actually attended. I think those drew a bit of a bigger crowd, but still a very big crowd of students and community members outside, and I thought that was interesting. In the past, they had just kind of let them go up to the meeting, but I think this time they sort of funneled them more into the public comment, and I thought it was interesting because public comment is still kind of a new thing. It's still like maybe 2 years old. And I just thought it was interesting how many people talked, and then O'Connor said okay, and then they went through with it, but they let a lot of people talk.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to touch on actually, is because I up until yesterday I didn't know that these meetings were open to the public. Like I didn't know if they were advertised or whatever until I was in the studio and someone said, "Oh yeah, like you can go to that." Have they always been that way?
Yeah, so there's kind of a strange policy. So the board has the public meetings. Those are somewhat advertised. There, you go on temple.edu/secretary. You can find out all the trustees, all their names, where they work, all the meeting times, all the committees, and all the meeting times for the committees too. But yeah, they have executive session where they sort of meet in private, and that's where they discuss, maybe what they're going to talk about the next meeting, or maybe just what they're going to say out loud in public. And then in public, it's more reading the resolutions that they've made already, and then people can talk during the sort of big meetings.
I was like, wow, that's really interesting that, everybody can go there. Because, I think it does serve a purpose, that at least they can hear kind of what people are thinking, what people are feeling. Kind of give them a better sense, I guess, if they weren't already aware.
Yeah, and I think part of the packed crowd was, I saw a kid I have class with, and I was like, hey, it's nice to see you here, and he said, yeah, I'm just observing. It's public, so I wanted to check it out, and I hadn't really seen that before. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, because one of the things I thought was interesting with the previous meeting that we talked about last week is that there were people there that were saying, no stadium, but give us $15 an hour wages. And I was like, well, this isn't like about $15 an hour wages. I was like, and certainly that meeting had much more yelling, and I thought, honestly, that they missed students who wanted to speak, kind of missed an opportunity to have a kind of civilized dialogue with some important people who, had some influence in this thing.
Yeah, I think the 15 now component has had a little trouble staying on message, connecting that message of the $15 minimum wage to no stadium. But I think maybe as jobs become more a part of the conversation, if this becomes more likely, if it gets off the ground, there's sort of an easier connection to make there. But as of right now, it's hard to gauge what the connection is. But there are more complicated arguments that can be made. But yeah.
All right, great. Well, Joe, thanks so much for joining us.
All right, Ryan, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break here on Rational Radio. Be sure to stay tuned. We have one more discussion coming up, a little arts and entertainment article to talk about, so that should be a good time. But you are listening to Beyond the Lede on Rational Radio on WHIP Radio, Philly's #1 college radio station. We'll be right back.
Okay, forest animals, today is a new day. Kids are coming to the forest, and it's up to us to make their visit a good one. Sparrow.
Yes?
Have you practiced the most popular bird songs for the year?
Of course.
Catchy. I like it. Okay, River.
Dude,
How's the temperature?
it's a refreshing 52 degrees, man. Perfect for a little riverside shoeless relaxation.
Ah, good. Owl, you here? Course. Who's asking? I am. Look, you know the drill. Sleep during the day, scare the kids at night. Perfect. I love my job. Oak Tree?
What's up?
Still in the same place I left you last year. That's what I like. Consistency.
Well, it's not like I'm going anywhere for the next couple hundred years.
I know. I love it. Turtle. Turtle.
He's not here yet, man.
He's late every morning. You'd think he would have learned by now to leave the night before our meetings. Okay. Squirrel. Has anybody seen Mr. Squirrel?
The forest has been preparing just for you. Visit a forest near you today. To learn more about cool things to do in the forest, visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hey, is that a faucet running?
Nope, that's not a faucet. That's a river rushing through the forest.
It is?
Yeah, forest rivers provide over 100 million people with clean water to drink. The water comes straight from the forest to us. In fact...
What? I can't hear you because of the vacuum.
That's not a vacuum. That's the trees in the forest cleaning up the air we breathe.
How do trees clean the air?
They soak up the dirty air on their leaves, branches, and trunks, which means clean air for us.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Yep, but the forest does more than give us clean air and water. It gives us shade for hot days, birds to listen to, and trees to climb.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know how cool the forest could be. Hey, let's go explore some more.
Visit the forest today and enjoy all it does, just for you. To learn more about the forest and find one near you, go to discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
I wish I was in school.
I wish I was in school.
I wish I was in school.
Summer isn't fun when you're hungry.
If only I had a big test today.
Or a book report to give. Give me a math quiz.
Give me some homework.
If your child relies on free school lunches, we can help provide them with free meals this summer.
I'll stay after class. I'll clean the chalkboard. I'll keep my desk real clean.
So they can stop worrying about food and start focusing on fun.
I'll do extra homework. I'll clean the class pet's cage. I'll skip recess. I wish I was in school.
I wish I was in school.
School might end, but free lunches don't have to. Find your local Feeding America food bank for help. Together, we're feeding America.
To find your local Feeding America food bank, visit feedingamerica.org/summer meals. A message from Feeding America and the Ad Council.
My name is Dale Pazinski. I'm 19 years old, and this is how I live united. I've always been kind of a computer geek, and I found a way to use those skills to help the homeless in my community. For people facing hard times, computer skills and a basic resume are so important. It may seem like a small thing, but it makes a huge difference in people's lives. So with United Way, I created a program where I work with the homeless. Together, we go through their whole job history, write a resume, and then save it on their very own USB drive. We provide workbooks and training certificates. I even budgeted for cupcakes so we can celebrate as a class when one of our people gets a job. That's huge. When somebody says, "Hey man, that job that you helped me apply for, I got it." That's what Living United feels like to me. My name is Dale Pazinski. I help people achieve financial independence. So I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Hey, this is John DeBella from MGK, and you're listening to Philly's #1 college radio station, WHIP. Or backwards, we would say, PIHW Station Radio College 1, number Phillies 2 listen, your, and KGM from DeBella John is this, hey.
Welcome back to WHIP Radio, Philly's #1 college radio station. You're listening to Beyond the Lede in the Rational Radio time slot here on this Wednesday afternoon. Big discussion we just had about the last Board of Trustees meeting. It'll be interesting to really see how that one plans out in the near future. But now we're moving on to something else. I promised an arts and entertainment article, and that's what we're about to dive into, something I really had no idea about until I kind of dove into this article before the interview, and that's of the closing of the Society Hill Playhouse after 57 years. To talk about this more now, we're joined by Angela Gervasi, who wrote the article. Angela, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me here.
So tell me a little bit about kind of what you learned doing this article. It's sad to see after half a century this thing is coming down.
Right. So the Playhouse has been in Philadelphia working for about 57 years. And when the Temple News first wanted to do this article, we actually had no idea that there was even a Temple connection. But it turns out the founders of the Playhouse actually met at an acting class here at Temple in the late 1940s.
Wow. I mean, it's so cool. I was reading the article, and unfortunately, condos are going up in its place, which as I was saying to you before, I feel like that's the trend now, but I feel like so many of these buildings are so cool and, so historic and have been around for so long. It's just like, nope, like, hey, we're done with the Playhouse. It's time for condos.
Right. Yeah, it's a little sad, definitely. And people living on the block aren't actually very happy about it because they're very concerned about parking and all of that. There's not going to be any parking for the condos, but the Toll Brothers, which is the company that is shutting the Playhouse down, or buying the Playhouse is a better word for it, they reached out to Dean Cogan, the founder, a couple of years ago, and she wasn't really willing to give it up just yet, but it's a little sad because she's probably, in her 80s and working 2 theaters, and it's gotten to be a lot for her, so she felt like it was time, but it's very sad to see it go.
And so what are the people in the community saying about this? I'm sure they're sad to see it go. Was it a popular theater? Did it bring a lot of people in?
Right, so it was definitely a very popular theater. And I asked Dean Cogan, the founder, when did you realize that this was going to be a staple of Philadelphia theater? And she said, well, it just happened, Yeah. Actually, there was, what didn't make it into the article, unfortunately, was that the Society Hill Playhouse had a school for children called the Philadelphia Youth Theater. I'm pretty sure that was the name. And Dean Cogan was one of the teachers in it, and she actually got to train Kevin Bacon. So
oh, wow.
He's an alumnus of a school created by the Society Hill Playhouse.
That's quite the spectacle. Do you think it had anything? Do you think it was hurt by not being on kind of the Avenue of the Arts with a bunch of the other playhouses in the city?
Right. So yeah, it's almost very deliberately not in that location, right, which is cool. When Dean and Jay Cogan first founded the theater, they wanted something that had more of an off-Broadway feel to it. As far as I'm aware, the top theater seats around 220, 230 people, and that's the largest theater in the building.
Yeah.
The other one's like a cabaret-style room, which is like less than 100 seats. So it's a much smaller feel than, say, the Walnut Street Theater or something you would see on Avenue of the Arts, like the Suzanne Roberts Theater. They kind of wanted a more like intimate, offbeat kind of vibe for it, which they totally succeeded.
Yeah. Did you, when you went, I saw in the article, it doesn't have indoor plumbing?
Oh, well, when they first, they were college graduates. They went to grad school in Colorado, and so they didn't have a ton of money when they were opening this theater, and they were looking around for different buildings, and they actually, Dean Cogan said they found this theater near where the Constitution Center is now, and it was so old that when she was touring it, she actually fell through the stage. So their budget wasn't great, but they found this old, it used to be, they used to hold like receptions there, and then it used to be a bingo church, meaning that like it was a church that needed a lot of money. But yeah, there used to be a pastor or a reverend there, and he had been defrocked, which means they like stripped him of its like clerical title, and they took all the copper and plumbing from the building. It's a really weird story. Yeah, so when they came in, there was just like nothing. There was no copper, no pipes. So they had to reconfigure everything. They had to paint stuff. They bought it in 1959. They didn't really have their first performance until 1960 because there was a lot of renovation that had to be done.
Wow. What was it like for you when you went and walked around the theater when you were writing this article?
It was kind of like ominous because, it was empty, of course. It's not like it's shut down yet.
Right, yeah.
They're preparing for 2 or 3 more performances, so they're like in the middle of building some sets. But all the chairs are empty. It's nothing super flashy or crazy, but I think that kind of adds to the authenticity of the place. What's cool is that there's a lot of these neon signs in the lounge of the theater, and Len Davidson, he's a Philly artist who works a lot with neon signs, created them, and they're like the different titles of different plays that they really succeeded in. And Dean Cogan has this dog, this Doberman she named Tonka. She kept talking about him to me, and she said she had Len Davidson make a sign that says Tonka on it. But a lot of times, she said, when people walk into the theater, they say, "Oh, I've never seen that play," because they don't realize it's her dog.
Oh, wow.
But it's a really cute little place. You can tell there's a lot of love put into it.
Is there anything kind of surrounding it that has to do with theater, or is it kind of all by itself?
Right. Yeah, there's nothing really on that block. Thinking about it, it almost looks like this standalone house just in the middle of a block. It's almost directly between Lombard and South.
Okay.
What's cool is that there's a big mural mosaic on the side that Isaiah Zager made, and she was a little bit sad that that's going to be going down when they renovate the house, because when they built it, she was really happy about it, and she said there were some neighbors actually complaining about the mosaic, and it made her really angry.
Yeah. And so do they have plans for after the theater? Did they tell you, what their plans are going forward?
Right, so Jean Cogan actually has her eye on a bookstore in Port Richmond called Port Richmond Books, and she's already in the works to create this new little cabaret style theater. So maybe we'll be hearing about that soon, hopefully.
Because you said they own one other theater, right?
Right.
In addition to this one?
Well, okay, so the Society Hill Playhouse, a little confusing. It has 2 theaters, 2 floors. So
okay.
The bottom floor has the Red Room, which is a 99-seat cabaret kind of theater, and it has these red curtains, and you feel like you're in the 50s when you walk into that room. And then when you go to the second floor, there's a much larger 223, I think, seat theater. So she was operating both, directing stuff, casting stuff. Wow. So if she is actually going to move on with her Port Richmond Books plan, then she would only be managing one theater, and probably with the help of a lot of people.
Oh, okay. And so what would happen with the other part of it? Would someone take over the other kind of section of it, I guess?
Right. So the Toll Brothers is actually buying both theaters, the entire building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's a lot of properties. I think they're turning it into about 20 apartments.
Okay, wow.
And it's not a huge building, but I guess they're fitting a lot into that space.
Yeah. So sad to see kind of a landmark like this go. Were there any, other than Kevin Bacon, do you know of any other famous actors that came through here, or famous shows that were ever put on?
Right. She said they've done so many different shows. They've done weird shows. Right now, this director is doing a surrealistic version of Hamlet that involves people dressing up as animals. And Dean Cogan didn't even know much about it, but she's so open to creative ideas that she'll kind of let anybody who's really committed to their play, perform in that space. They've done very popular productions. They've performed Grease. They did the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which she said a lot of people in the neighborhood loved going to that. They've done, I'm trying to think, they did Schoolhouse Rock Live. That was a big one. They did this play called Nonsense, which is apparently the longest running musical comedy in Philadelphia theater history, ever.
Wow.
They booked it for about 5 weeks. It ended up running for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane. And what was she like? Let's talk a little bit about her when you were doing the interview. Was she nostalgic? Was she sad? Was she happy to move on maybe to this bookstore, thinking, hey, it's like a new kind of adventure in my life?
Right. Yeah, I was almost afraid to ask her too many questions about the closing,
right, yeah.
because it must feel so emotional for her. But she every time we got to that subject, she quoted this play called Shadowbox, and there's a line in the play that says nothing lasts forever, and that was what she just kept saying. She was pretty matter-of-fact about it. The funny part is, despite the fact that she's been working for 57 years in this playhouse, she doesn't seem like she's going to be stopping anytime soon. She really is excited to keep doing theater. She's actually on the library board of visitors here at Temple, so she's active and doing her thing. I think she just felt like it was kind of time for it to end, and she's pretty proud. She said, almost 60 years, it's a pretty good run, and I had to agree with her.
And you said it all started here at Temple?
Yes. So she didn't remember the year, but it was somewhere in the late 1940s. Dean Cogan, she transferred from Northwestern University to Temple.
Okay.
And she knew she wanted to direct, which wasn't very common for women in that time, but she was very determined. And she walked into an acting class and saw Jay Cogan, and reportedly, she tells everyone this, she called her mother that night and said, "I just met the man I was going to marry." And Jay Cogan had no idea at the time. And what's funny is that her mom actually visited her the next week at college so she could get a look at this guy, and he had no idea. Eventually they got married in 1950, and that's when they went to graduate school in Colorado, and they both really liked directing. But yeah, no, it all started here at Temple, and her husband actually transferred here. He had been fighting in World War II, and the GI Bill helped him afford college. So they both kind of came from these crazy paths, and they just crossed, and now we have this theater.
Yeah, and are they still married to this day?
So Jay Cogan unfortunately passed in, I think, 1993.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess, do we get the sense that he was very involved with this up until he died?
Oh, definitely. She told me he was a very good actor. He starred in some of the plays, and she assured me that she wasn't just saying that because he was her husband. He starred in a lot of the plays, and he directed more plays than her, but a lot of that might have been the whole people not expecting women to direct.
Yeah.
Dean told me she actually directed this play called The Changing Room, which is about men on, I think, a rugby team, and it was so unheard of for a woman because it was a lot of guys getting changed, and they would freak out every time she walked in, and she was just trying to do her job.
Yeah. When she was here at Temple, did they have an opportunity? Was she able to direct plays here? Or was it more just kind of a study of theater?
I think it was more of a study of theater. Temple's theater program, I understand, was very different back then because it was kind of lumped together with radio and television. Television was like a new program back then. And, they didn't have communications or anything. So I think she was basically studying it. And then when she went to Colorado, I think it was Denver University, she really learned more about how to direct specifically.
Do you know where she's from? Like if she was born in Philadelphia or from the area, or? She's
actually from somewhere in Maryland.
Okay. Because I was wondering, how do you pick that location for the Playhouse? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You think, oh, maybe, this area will develop, or maybe, I should look elsewhere. Because it is kind of off the beaten path, like we said earlier. Not kind of lumped in with all the other theater, so I didn't know if there was a reason for that location.
Right. She did tell me that it wasn't like a fashionable decision back then. Now it might be a little trendier to be in Society Hill, but I think a lot of it might have just been about how much money they had.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was about getting something that wasn't on Broad Street. It's kind of cool because it's like this hole in the wall. People kind of have to make an effort to go, but once you do, you see how cool it is.
What for you? What was kind of the most interesting thing about doing this story? Kind of what you learned that maybe was surprising, or you're like, wow, that's so cool, or?
I guess it was just to see how much knowledge one person could have after working for 57 years in one space. The way Dean just listed plays over and over again, things I had never heard of, like Shadowbox and Marit Sade and American Ladies, and it was a cool interview space because she was surrounded by these posters. It had to be like hundreds of posters of every play just framed, and she's just pointing at them, remembering these little anecdotes with everything, and it was just cool to see somebody surrounded by so much of their own history and ready to share that with the world.
And did she ever mention what her favorite play was that they put on, or that she directed, or?
She was very happy about Nonsense, because that
Okay.
was, yeah. Besides that, she did tell me there were plays that kind of flopped. There were plays where there were more people on stage than in the audience.
Oh, wow.
But, and there was one play where an actor was making so many crazy hand gestures that he knocked over the set. But she said that was kind of part of their, she did tell me that she did not regret any of the plays they put on because everything was just a learning experience and helped them to grow and flourish.
Wow, that's really cool. Well, Angela, thanks for joining us here. We're glad that you were able to come in and talk about the article.
No problem. It was great. Thank you.
So that's it, everybody, for Beyond the Lede today here on this Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week for next week's edition of the show in the Rational Radio time slot. But until then, have a great day. You're listening to Rational Radio on WHIP Radio, Philly's #1 college radio station.